The courtroom had no windows, only hard light that made skin look pale. Jack Mercer sat on a bench with Hazel pressed into his side, her fingers locked around his. Under her other arm, she held her stuffed beaver-faded blue fur and a crooked smile. A thin line of red stitching ran along its belly. Two federal marshals opened the door and guided a man inside. Mid-50s, thinning gray hair combed back, a charcoal suit that had been expensive once, silver cuffs on his wrists. He walked like he owned the floor anyway. Jack watched him without blinking. Hazel made a small sound like a swallow that went wrong. Her grip tightened until it hurt. "That's him," she whispered. Jack leaned closer. "Who, baby?" "The one at recess. The one by the fence." The man sat at the defense table and lifted his gaze as if he could feel hers. His eyes were pale cold and steady. He looked at Hazel and smiled slow, like a door closing. Jack's body rose before his brain agreed. The bench scraped. The marshals shifted. Hazel's beaver slipped from her arm and hit the floor. The red stitches flashed bright against the tile. A voice cut through the room, clean and calm. "Mr. Mercer, sit down." Jack froze mid-step. He knew that voice. Claire Wren stood by the prosecutor's table, shoulders squared, a folder tucked under her arm. Hair pinned back, face unreadable. She did not look at the man in cuffs. She looked only at Jack like she was holding him in place with her eyes. Jack swallowed it and sat, keeping Hazel tight against his side. The judge entered. Everyone stood. Everyone sat. Words began moving around the room, official and sharp, but Jack heard them like distant surf. Hazel leaned into him. "He saw me," she breathed. Jack stared at the man's cuffed hands. He thought of Port Silas fog, how it swallowed shapes until they were close enough to touch. He thought of fire, because some memories came with their own heat. 3 weeks earlier, Port Silas woke up damp and gray. Fog rolled in off the water and wrapped the streets. The ferry horn moaned once long and low, and the sound slid between houses like it knew where to go. Jack's workshop sat behind their rental, a one-bay garage that smelled of cedar shavings and salt. He liked early hours because the town was quiet, and he could pretend life was simple measure, cut, sand, fit. Wood made sense. People did not. He ran his palm along a plank clamped to the bench. Tight grain, strong. He could build something that would last. Then the old scene pushed in unasked. Orange light behind his eyelids. Heat, smoke, Hazel screaming, Rowan shouting his name. Jack's fingers curled until his nails bit skin. He let go of the wood and forced his shoulders down. In the corner, propped against the wall, a charred strip of timber sat like a bad keepsake. He told himself it was a reminder. He did not say of what. The back door opened. Warm air and the smell of toast spilled in. Dad Hazel's voice was still rough with sleep. Jack turned and softened his face. "Hey, bug." She shuffled in wearing mismatched socks and a sweatshirt too big for her. Mr. Blue hung from her hand by one arm. "You were loud," she said. "I dropped something." Hazel squinted at him the way she did when she sensed a lie. Her eyes were Rowan's eyes, gray-green and steady. She held up the beaver. His tummy itches again. Jack took the toy. The red stitches were uneven in places, bright thread on old fabric. Rowan had sewn it up years ago after Hazel tore it on a thorn. Jack ran his thumb over the seam. Tight, but there was a hard ridge under the fabric, like something small caught inside. "I'll fix it after school," Jack said. Hazel nodded satisfied and tucked the beaver back under her arm. She leaned in for a quick hug. She smelled like kid shampoo and sleep. Breakfast was small and routine. Oatmeal, honey, apples. Jack packed a lunch while Hazel sat at the table and swung her legs, heel-tapping the chair rung in a steady beat. Tap, tap, tap. "You have art today," Jack said. Hazel brightened. "We're drawing the lighthouse." "The one on the point." She nodded hard, with the big light. Jack pictured it tall and white, cutting through fog that never really left. He drove Hazel to Cedar Line Elementary in his old pickup heater, wheezing windows fogged at the corners. The school appeared out of the mist, kids spilling from cars in bright jackets. Parents waved and hurried. Hazel unbuckled and paused. "Dad?" "Yeah." "Did Mom like fog?" The question hit him like a fist to the ribs. He kept his hands on the wheel. She liked what it did to the sound he said. Hazel frowned. "Fog doesn't have sound." Jack managed a small smile. "She said it made the world quiet enough to hear your own thoughts." Hazel considered that, then kissed his cheek quick and serious. "Okay." She hopped down backpack, bouncing beaver, tucked under her arm. Jack watched her disappear through the doors. He stayed in the pickup longer than he needed to, hands still on the steering wheel. Parents came and went. A crossing guard lifted a stop sign and let a line of cars pass. Jack waited until the lot thinned until no one could look at him and read what was on his face. On the way home, he stopped at the hardware store for a box of stainless screws. The bell over the door jingled, and the warmth inside fogged his glasses. Mara at the counter handed him a paper cup of coffee without asking. "You look tired," she said. "I'm always tired." She nodded like she understood more than she should. Her eyes flicked to the tiny photo taped beside the register. Hazel in a Halloween costume. "She's getting tall." Jack's throat tightened. "Yeah." Mara hesitated, then said softer, "Rowan would have liked that lighthouse project." Jack stared at the screws in his hand. The metal felt too cold. "Have a good one, Mara," he said, and left before his voice could break. He passed the lot where their old house had stood. New fences, fresh paint. Still the air felt colder there. Jack kept his eyes on the road. Back at the shop, he stood in the doorway and listened. Distant gulls, a truck passing, the ferry horn far off. He set the screws on the bench and washed his hands in the sink, soap and water scrubbing until his knuckles went raw pink. When he shut off the tap, the smell of smoke still clung to his skin, or maybe it lived in his head. He dried hands on a rag and went back to work. Jack went to the bench and picked up the plank again. He measured twice. He cut once. He told himself that if he kept doing things the right way, the world might too. Jack kept his hands moving until the light outside thinned to slate. He planed the edge, checked the fit, tightened the clamp. Cedar dust gathered on his forearms like pale sand. When he finally set the tool down, the shop was quiet enough that he could hear the furnace click in the house and the distant slap of water against the dock pilings. He washed up again, slower this time. The soap smelled like citrus and metal. He tried to focus on that instead of the phantom smoke that sometimes rose in the back of his throat for no reason at all. At 2:45, he drove back to Cedar Line Elementary. The fog had lifted a little, but not enough to give the world clean lines. Cars idled along the curb. Kids poured out of the doors in bright jackets, backpacks, bouncing voices sharp and high. Jack spotted Hazel immediately, her hair loose from its ponytail, Mr. Blue tucked under her arm like a football. She ran to him and slammed into his leg with both arms. "Dad, we drew the lighthouse." "Show me later," he said, kissing the top of her head. Her hair smelled like crayons and playground dirt. Hazel pulled back and started talking fast, hands moving as if she could draw in the air. "Ms. Landry said the beam has to cut through fog. Like this." She angled her arm and made a slow sweep. Mr. Blue's crooked grin bobbed. Jack listened, nodding, smiling at the right places. He was trying to be present. He was doing a decent job until something in the crowd made his spine tighten. Across the street near the chain-link fence that bordered the schoolyard, a woman stood alone. She was not holding a child's hand. She was not talking to anyone. She wore a gray wool coat that looked too warm for the damp afternoon, and her dark hair was pinned back so neatly it seemed deliberate. Her posture was still in a way that did not match the restless motion around her. Her gaze was fixed on Hazel. Jack's first thought was simple and stupid. Maybe she is someone's aunt. Maybe she is lost. Port Silas did not get many strangers, but it did get the occasional new face. The ferry brought tourists. People drifted in and out for a week and left with salt air in their clothes. Then Hazel waved at a classmate and turned, and the woman's eyes tracked her with a slow, careful attention that did not feel like accident. Jack stepped half a pace so his body blocked the line between them. He kept his hand on Hazel's shoulder, light but firm. Hazel kept talking, and Ms. Landry said the rocks are black because they are wet. Jack nodded again. He watched the woman in the gray coat. Her face did not change. She did not look away when he moved. She did not flinch at his stare. After a long beat, she lifted a phone to her ear without turning it on, a gesture that felt rehearsed. Then she walked down the sidewalk with measured steps and disappeared into the thinning fog. Jack let out a breath he did not know he was holding. "Dad." Hazel tilted her head. "You okay?" "Yeah." He forced his shoulders loose. "Just tired." On the drive home, Hazel chattered about art and snack time, and how Connor Webb ate glue once and swore it tasted like marshmallows. Jack laughed, but his eyes kept flicking to the rearview mirror. He told himself he was being ridiculous. He told himself his mind was trained to look for danger, because danger had once found them in the most ordinary place a family could be: a home, a kitchen, a hallway full of smoke. A memory could teach the body bad habits. Still, when he pulled into their gravel drive, he caught himself scanning the street before he turned off the engine. That night, Hazel spread her lighthouse drawing on the kitchen table. The lighthouse was tall and proud, the fog rendered as swirls of gray pencil around it. The beam of light was a thick yellow streak that pushed through the haze, determined. Hazel had added a tiny stick figure at the bottom, waving. "That's me," she said, tapping it. "I'm not scared of the fog." Jack traced the edge of the paper with his fingertip. You shouldn't be. Hazel chewed her lip and studied him. Were you scared of it today? Jack looked at her, then away, busying himself with the dish towel. No. Hazel did not press, but she watched him with that quiet patience kids had when they knew the truth and were deciding whether to forgive the lie. The next morning brought a thin rain that made everything smell alive. Jack packed Hazel's lunch and drove her to school, then headed into town for supplies. Saturday meant the farmers' market set up along the waterfront tents, flapping the air thick with coffee-fried dough and fish. Hazel insisted on coming. She loved the market because people slipped her samples like she was a regular, a strawberry here, a cube of sharp cheese there. Jack let her because the shop could wait, and because it felt good to do normal things without measuring the risk. They walked between stalls. Hazel balanced on the edge of the curb, arms out, Mr. Blue tucked under her chin. Jack bought a sack of apples and a loaf of bread still warm. A vendor handed Hazel a tiny paper cup of clam chowder. She sipped, made a face, then sipped again. That's brave, Jack said. It's weird, Hazel said, but I like it. Jack smiled and turned toward the parking lot to load the bags into his truck. That was when he saw the silver sedan. It was parked across the street, angled toward the market. The windshield held a sheet of pale glare from the overcast sky. For a second, Jack thought the car was empty. Then a face resolved behind the glass. The same woman from the school fence. She sat very still, hands low, eyes forward. She was not eating, not talking, not doing anything that people did while waiting for someone. Her gaze seemed to land on Jack, then shift to Hazel, then settle again like a weight. Jack's chest tightened. He set the bags down slowly, as if sudden movement might start something. Hazel climbed onto the tailgate and swung her legs, humming feet tapping the metal in a short rhythm. Jack stared at the sedan. He waited for the woman to look away, to get caught to blink and pretend she had not been staring. She did not. Jack stepped into the street, not crossing, just shifting his position so the angle changed. He raised his chin, a silent question. The woman's expression did not change. Then, with unhurried precision, she started the car. The sedan rolled forward and merged into traffic as if it had never been there at all. Jack stood with one hand on the tailgate and watched the space where it had been. His palms were damp despite the cold. Hazel leaned toward him. Dad, can we get the honey sticks? Yeah, Jack said, though his voice came out flat. He bought the honey sticks and let Hazel pick two, one for now and one for later. He made himself talk, made himself laugh when Hazel got sticky and tried to wipe her hands on his jacket. He kept his eyes moving, searching the crowd for gray wool. He did not see it again. By Sunday afternoon, he almost convinced himself it was nothing. Port Silas was small. Seeing the same person twice was not impossible. Maybe she had a kid in Hazel's grade. Maybe she was new and awkward. Maybe she stared because she recognized Hazel from town gossip. People here knew who had lost someone. Grief left a mark that strangers could see. Monday took that fragile story and crushed it. Hazel's school had a staff training day, so Jack kept her with him while he drove down to the ferry terminal to pick up a set of marine fittings he could not get locally. The terminal sat at the edge of town where the road ended in wet concrete and a line of cars. The water beyond was steel gray, the sky the same color, the boundary between them blurred. Hazel pressed her nose to the passenger window. I like the boats, she said. Me too. The ferry horn sounded one low note that vibrated in Jack's ribs. The smell of diesel and seaweed drifted through the cracked window. They got out and walked toward the ticket booth. Hazel skipped over puddles, boots splashing. Mr. Blue dangled by one arm and swung with her steps. Jack saw the woman before Hazel did. She stood near the entrance, half under the overhang, as if she belonged there, and also did not. Gray coat, dark hair pinned back, hands folded in front of her like she was waiting for a verdict. Her eyes were on Hazel. Jack stopped so fast Hazel bumped his hip. Dad, Hazel looked up. Jack's mouth went dry. He stepped in front of Hazel again, a move he did not even think about now. His gaze locked onto the woman's face. This time she did not pretend to be busy. She met his eyes and held them. There was something in her expression that did not fit the scene, a flicker of recognition, like she had learned his face from a photograph and was surprised the photograph had become real. Jack took a step closer. Do I know you? The woman's throat moved to swallow. Her lips parted as if she might speak, then closed again. Hazel's small hand slid into Jack's. Her fingers were cold. Jack felt the same old heat crawl up his neck, the same helpless anger he remembered from standing in the street watching his house burn while someone held him back. A gust of wind pushed mist under the overhang. The woman blinked, and for the first time her control slipped. Her eyes glistened, not with tears that fell, but with something that wanted to. A man in a rain jacket walked between them dragging a suitcase. The moment broke. When Jack shifted to keep the woman in sight, she was already moving away, turning with purpose toward the far end of the terminal. Her steps were quick now. She vanished into the crowd of commuters and tourists, swallowed by coats and umbrellas and fog. Jack stood there, heart pounding, staring at wet concrete. Hazel tugged his sleeve. "Dad, are we going on the big boat?" "Yeah," Jack said. He forced his voice steady. "We're going." They boarded, found seats, watched the shoreline drift away. Hazel pointed out seals bobbing in the wake. Jack nodded at the right moments, but his mind kept replaying the woman's face at the terminal, the way she had looked at Hazel, like a person looking at a mistake they could not undo. On the return trip, Jack stared through the rain-streaked window and tried to measure his own fear. He tried to name it. It was not panic. Panic was loud. This was quieter. This was the feeling of being watched by something patient. When they drove off the ferry and into town, Jack checked his mirrors again. A dark SUV sat 2 cars back in the line. Tall and clean windows, tinted enough to hide the driver. It turned off before Jack did, heading toward the highway. Jack told himself that meant nothing, too. At home, Hazel dumped her backpack by the door and ran to the kitchen for a snack. Jack stood in the entryway, keys still in his hand, listening to the house settle. The heater kicked on with a soft whoosh. The air smelled like laundry soap and old wood. He looked down at Mr. Blue, abandoned on the floor where Hazel had dropped him. The red-stitched seam across the beaver's belly caught the light. Jack bent and picked it up. The fabric was worn thin from years of being held. His thumb pressed the seam again. That hard ridge was still there under the stitches, stubborn as a pebble. Hazel called from the kitchen, cheerful. "Dad, can I have peanut butter?" "Yeah," Jack called back. He held the beaver in his hands a moment longer than he needed to, then carried it to Hazel and set it on the table beside her plate. Hazel immediately tucked it close, her palm resting on the red stitching, as if that was where safety lived. Jack watched her eat, watched her smile with a smear of peanut butter at the corner of her mouth, and felt something settle into him, heavy and cold. 3 times was not coincidence. Jack tried to keep that thought from hardening into something else, something that would leak into Hazel's days like dye in water. He smiled when she smiled. He answered when she asked. He made breakfast, packed lunches, checked homework. He did all the normal things with the careful hands of a man carrying a glass he could not afford to drop. But his eyes stayed busy. On Tuesday afternoon, rain thinned to a mist that made the sidewalks shine. Jack picked Hazel up from Cedar Line and drove her straight to the point. She had been begging to visit the Lighthouse Park, the place where the grass sloped down to black rocks and you could watch the sea shove itself against them. Hazel pressed her forehead to the window as the lighthouse came into view, a white column rising out of gray. "Look, Dad, it's like my drawing." "Yeah," Jack said. "It's a good one." They parked near the trailhead and walked toward the bluff. The air tasted like salt and wet stone. The wind carried the sharp smell of seaweed and something faintly sweet from the pine trees behind them. Hazel skipped ahead, boots dark with water, Mr. Blue tucked under her arm. Every few steps she stopped to point out things Jack would have missed. If he let himself a crab shell in a tide pool, a feather stuck to a rock, a piece of driftwood shaped like a crooked arrow. Jack kept a hand on the strap of her backpack. He did not like the way the path narrowed near the fence line, or how the fog made the world feel closer than it was. He did not like how sound traveled here, the way voices carried and then vanished. Hazel climbed onto a low rock and lifted her arms out like airplane wings. "I'm the lighthouse," she announced, voice bright. Jack laughed just a little. "Lighthouses don't flap." "I do." She hopped down and ran toward the playground near the picnic tables. It was small, and new plastic slides, and a climbing wall that smelled like fresh rubber. A few families were scattered around. A man in a knit cap drank coffee from a thermos. 2 toddlers fought over a red bucket at the edge of a sand patch. A couple sat on a bench, their shoulders touching heads, bent over a phone. Jack followed Hazel to the swings. She climbed onto one and kicked off hair lifting in the wind. The chains creaked with each arc. "Higher," Hazel said. Jack pushed gentle at first, then a little harder. The swing lifted, and Hazel laughed, a clean sound that made the knot in his chest loosen for half a second. Then Hazel's voice changed. "Dad?" Jack stopped pushing. "Yeah?" Hazel pointed with her chin small and quick. A woman stood near the edge of the playground, just outside the rubber mat. She wore a dark jacket and jeans hood down, despite the damp. Her face was plain in a way that made it hard to remember, but her eyes were sharp and restless. She was not looking at the other kids. She was looking at Hazel. Jack felt the hairs on his arms rise. Hazel slowed on the swing feet, dragging. Mr. Blue dangled from her elbow. The woman stepped closer, smile too practiced. "Hi there," she said, voice soft, like she was trying not to startle a bird. "What's your name?" Hazel looked at Jack, then back. She did not answer. "That's a cute little beaver," the woman added. "Does he have a name?" Hazel's fingers tightened around the toy. "Mr. Blue." The woman nodded, as if that mattered. "Do you come here a lot, Hazel?" Jack's stomach dropped. He stepped forward, boots scraping wet gravel. "How do you know her name?" Jack said. The woman's eyes flicked to him, then away, then back. "Oh, kids talk. I heard someone call her." Jack glanced around. No one had said Hazel's name, not once. Hazel slid off the swing and moved closer to Jack without being told. Her shoulder brushed his thigh. He rested a hand on the top of her head, light pressure a silent message. The woman crouched, staying just far enough away to pretend she was being respectful. "Sweetheart, do you live near here? The houses up the hill or closer to town?" Jack took another step. "That's enough." The woman held up her hands as if he was overreacting. "I'm just making conversation." Hazel's eyes went wide, then narrowed a little, the way they did when she tried to decide if someone was lying. The woman tilted her head. "Is it just you and your daddy? Do you two live alone?" Jack's jaw tightened. His hand went from Hazel's hair to her shoulder, firm now. He felt his pulse in his fingertips. "Walk away," Jack said. The woman's smile faltered. She stood brushing sand off her knees. Her gaze stayed on Hazel, not Jack. It was the gaze of someone measuring. Jack started forward. A voice cut in from behind them, calm, flat, almost bored. "Hey." Jack turned. A woman in a gray wool coat stepped into the space between Hazel and the stranger. Dark hair pinned back. Hands at her sides, not raised, not threatening. Just there like a door that had quietly closed. Claire Wren. Jack's throat went tight. He had not seen her since the ferry terminal. He had not expected to see her here at the lighthouse, standing so naturally in front of his daughter. Claire did not look at Jack right away. She looked at the stranger, her gaze steady and cold. "You're asking a kid for her address," Claire said. Her voice was still calm, but it carried. "That's not conversation." The stranger's eyes widened a fraction. She tried to laugh. "Excuse me." Claire shifted her weight subtle, like someone who knew how close was too close. "You heard me." The stranger glanced around, suddenly aware of other people. The man with the thermos had stopped sipping. The couple on the bench had lifted their heads. A toddler's mother was watching from the corner of her eye. The stranger straightened her jacket. "This is ridiculous." Claire's expression did not change. "Then it should be easy for you to leave." The stranger stared at Claire for a long second, fear and anger fighting on her. Then she turned and walked away, fast, cutting across the wet grass toward the parking lot without looking back. Claire waited until the stranger was out of sight. Only then did she turn toward Jack. Up close, Claire looked busied, not sleepy-tired, but worn in a deeper place, as if she had been carrying something heavy for years and had stopped pretending it was not heavy. Jack pulled Hazel behind his hip, protective, without apology. "Why are you here?" he said. Claire glanced down at Hazel, and for a moment her eyes softened, in a way that made Jack's skin prickle. It was not the usual softness adults used on kids. It was recognition, quick and private, like seeing a photo become real. "I was walking," Claire said. Jack did not believe her, but he did not say it. He watched her hands. They were empty. No phone, no bag. Hazel peered around Jack's leg. "You're the lady," she said. Claire's mouth twitched almost a smile, then vanished. "Hi, Hazel." Hazel hugged Mr. Blue tighter. "How did you know my name?" Claire did not blink. "I heard your dad say it." Jack's eyes narrowed. "I didn't." Claire's gaze flicked to him, then away, then back. A small pause, like she was adjusting a story. Then I heard someone else. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to scare you." Hazel studied her serious. "You didn't scare me." She did. Claire nodded once, like a promise made without words. "You did the right thing. You didn't answer." Jack felt anger rise sharp and clean. "You stepped in like you'd done it before." Claire's eyes held his. "I have." Jack's pulse kicked. "With my kid." Claire's throat moved. "With kids." Jack waited. He wanted her to fill the silence. He wanted her to say something that explained why she kept appearing at the edges of Hazel's life. Claire did not. Hazel shifted, restless. "Dad, can I go see the rocks?" Jack kept his eyes on Claire. "Stay where I can see you." Hazel nodded and trotted toward the bluff, careful near Puddle's boots splashing. She stopped at the fence and leaned forward, looking down at the black rocks and white foam. Jack lowered his voice. "What are you doing in Port Silas, Claire?" Claire's face went still. "Living?" "Why here?" Claire's gaze drifted past him toward the water, toward the lighthouse beam that was not needed in daylight. "It's quiet." Jack almost laughed. "Not for me." Claire looked back at him. You should keep her close. Jack's stomach clenched. Is that supposed to comfort me? Claire's eyes sharpened. It's supposed to keep her safe. Jack took a step closer, keeping his voice low. You don't get to talk about my daughter like you know her. Claire's breath came out slow, controlled. I know enough. Jack felt the urge to grab her coat sleeve to stop her from slipping away again. Instead, he asked, who was that woman? Claire glanced toward the parking lot where the stranger had disappeared. Not a friend. That's not an answer. Claire's jaw tightened. It's the honest part. Jack stared at her. The wind lifted a loose strand of her hair and plastered it to her cheek. She did not bother to fix it. Her eyes stayed on Hazel at the fence, tracking her with the same careful attention Jack had seen in the woman at the school, but different, protective, focused. Hazel turned and waved. Dad, look, a seal. Jack raised a hand back, but his eyes stayed on Claire. Claire spoke softly, almost to herself. She's a brave kid. Jack's voice came out rough. Her mom was brave. Claire's face tightened, a fast pain that she tried to hide. It slipped through anyway. A blink too long. A swallow that did not go down clean. Jack stepped in closer until he could smell her perfume, something clean and faint, like paper and rain. Do you know Rowan? Claire did not answer right away. Her gaze stayed on Hazel. When she finally looked at Jack, her eyes were dark and steady, but there was fear in them, real fear, like a person standing on ice that was starting to crack. I'm a lawyer, Claire says. Claire said instead. Jack held her stare. That's not what I asked. Claire's lips parted. For a second, Jack thought she might actually say it, might say Rowan's name, might say something that made the last 3 years rearrange themselves into a new shape. But Hazel's voice floated back. Dad, can we go down to the tide pools? Jack broke eye contact just for a moment. When he looked back, Claire had already shifted her stance, angled away like she was preparing to leave. Jack's jaw tightened. Don't walk off. Claire's gaze flicked to his hand the way it rested on Hazel's backpack, strapped knuckles pale with pressure. I wasn't going to, she said. Hazel ran back, cheeks pink from wind. Please. Jack nodded. All right. They walked down the path toward the rocks. Claire followed at a distance, not too close, not too far. Jack kept catching her in his peripheral vision, the gray coat moving like a shadow against the fog. At the tide pools, Hazel crouched and pointed excitedly at tiny anemones bright against the dark stone. Jack tried to focus on her joy, on the wet shine of the rocks, on the steady crash of waves. He tried to pretend Claire was not there. When he glanced back again, Claire was gone. No goodbye, no explanation. Just the space where she had been, and a faint set of footprints darkening the gravel, already blurring under mist. Jack clenched his hands until his fingers ached. On the drive home, Hazel talked about the tide pools and the seal, and how the lighthouse looked taller up close. Jack answered when he had to. His mind replayed the stranger's questions, the way she had said Hazel's name, the way Claire had stepped in like she owned the moment. At home, Hazel kicked off her boots and ran to her room. Jack stood in the hall listening to the soft thump of her drawer, opening the rustle of paper as she pulled out her drawings. Then he heard her humming low and steady a tune from a show she liked. Jack went into the kitchen and started dinner on autopilot, pasta sauce from a jar, garlic, and too much butter. He kept watching the window over the sink, though he did not know what he expected to see besides rain streaks in the neighbor's fence. After Hazel's bath, after teeth brushed and hair combed, she climbed into bed with Mr. Blue tucked under her chin. Jack sat on the edge of the mattress and smoothed the blanket, a habit from when she was smaller. Hazel turned her face toward him in the glow of her nightlight. Dad, yeah, Bug. The lady today, Hazel said, the one who helped. Jack's stomach tightened. Claire? Hazel nodded. She looked at me funny. Jack brushed hair off Hazel's forehead. Funny how? Hazel searched for words, eyes moving like she was looking for something hidden in the dark. Like she already knew me, she said finally, like she was trying not to cry. Jack went still. Hazel's fingers found the red stitching on Mr. Blue's belly and traced it slowly. She wasn't mad, Hazel added, just sad. Jack swallowed. His throat felt raw, as if he had breathed smoke. Go to sleep, he said, gentle. Hazel's eyes stayed on him. Are you mad at her? Jack forced a smile that did not reach his eyes. No. Hazel seemed to accept that the way kids accepted the weather. She turned onto her side, curling around Mr. Blue, palm resting on the red thread. Her breathing slowed. Jack sat there longer than he needed to. When he finally stood and turned off the light, the house felt too quiet. The heater kicked on and the vents sighed. Outside fog pressed against the windows like a hand. Jack lay in his own bed with his eyes open, listening for sounds that did not belong. A car door, footsteps on gravel, a voice, anything. Nothing came. Still sleep stayed out of reach. Sleep finally took Jack some time after midnight, not like a blanket, but like a hand over his mouth. When he woke, the room was still dark. The heater clicked on. Air moved through the vents with a tired sigh. For a moment he forgot where he was. Then he heard Hazel cough once in her room, small and ordinary, and his body remembered everything at once. He lay still, eyes open, listening. The house made its usual noises, pipes settling, the faint rattle of rain in the gutter. Nothing that belonged to an intruder, nothing that belonged to fear. Jack got up before his alarm. He pulled on jeans and a sweatshirt and walked barefoot to the front door. Cold seeped through the floorboards. He flicked the porch light on and looked out through the glass. Fog sat on the street like wet wool. The neighbor's truck was a ghost shape. The world ended at the edge of the light. Jack opened the door anyway. The porch was empty. The damp air hit his face sharp and clean. He stepped out and scanned left, then right, then down toward the drive. Gravel shone with moisture, no footprints, no tire tracks that did not belong. He forced himself to breathe through his nose. Salt, pine, wet dirt. The mailbox sat at the end of the drive metal, beaded with water. Jack walked to it and flipped it open. Bills, a grocery flyer, a thick envelope from the school fundraiser, and a postcard. It was wedged upright against the back wall of the box like someone wanted it to be seen first. The image on the front was Port Silas Lighthouse, white tower, half swallowed by fog beam, cutting a pale line through gray. The print was glossy enough to catch the weak morning light. Jack turned it over. No stamp, no postmark, no address. Only one sentence typed in black letters that looked too clean for a postcard you could buy at the ferry terminal gift shop. The attorney is not the only one watching. Jack read it once, then again slower. The words did not change. His fingers tightened on the card until it bent. He straightened it with his thumb, careful, as if the paper mattered more than it did. Then he stood there in the damp, staring at the neat line of ink. A car went by on the road near the waterfront, tires hissing on wet pavement. The sound made Jack's shoulders jump. He walked back up the drive with the postcard in his hand. Inside, the kitchen was dim and cool. He set the card on the counter and stared at it like it might move. Hazel padded in a minute later, rubbing her eyes, hair sticking up on one side. She had Mr. Blue under her arm, and her fingers were already drifting toward the red stitches without her noticing. "Morning," she mumbled. "Morning," Jack said. He turned his body so he blocked the counter. Hazel blinked at him. "Are you mad?" "No." She tilted her head. "You look like you are." Jack forced his face to relax. He opened a cabinet and pulled out the oatmeal. He kept his hands busy. He kept his voice even. "You want apples again?" he asked. Hazel nodded and climbed onto her chair. Mr. Blue sat beside her bowl like a guest. Jack cooked stirred sliced. The kitchen filled with warm cinnamon. For a few minutes the world narrowed to steam and the sound of Hazel's spoon tapping ceramic. Then Hazel looked up and said, "That lady from yesterday." Jack's grip tightened on the pot handle. "What about her?" Hazel shrugged, like it was nothing. "Is she your friend?" Jack set the pot down with care. "No." Hazel's brows pulled together. "Then why did she help me?" Jack did not answer fast enough. Hazel watched him. "You think she is bad?" "I do not know what she is," Jack said. Hazel traced the red stitching on Mr. Blue's belly with her fingertip. She was sad. Jack's mouth went dry. "Eat your breakfast." Hazel took a bite, obedient but not satisfied. She chewed slowly, still watching him, as if she could see through his skin to whatever he was hiding from himself. Jack drove her to school through a light rain. The wipers squeaked on the windshield. Fog thinned at the edges but never fully left. The ferry horn sounded once distant and low, and Hazel turned her face toward the sound like it was a song. At the drop-off line, Hazel unbuckled and paused with her backpack half on. "Dad," she said. "Yeah. If someone watches you, does that mean they are going to hurt you?" Jack's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Why are you asking that?" Hazel shrugged again, but her eyes were serious. "Because you look like you are listening for footsteps." Jack swallowed. "Sometimes people watch for dumb reasons," he said. "Sometimes they watch because they are nosy. Sometimes they watch because they are lost." Hazel did not look convinced. And sometimes, Jack leaned closer. He brushed a strand of hair off her cheek. "If you ever feel weird, you do not answer questions. You come to me. You come to a teacher. You come to any mom with a stroller. You make noise." "Okay." Hazel nodded. "Okay." She hesitated, then kissed his cheek the way she always did when she wanted to make him feel better. Quick. Serious. Jack watched her walk toward the doors. She did not skip today. Mr. Blue was tucked under her arm like a shield. Jack stayed in the lot longer than usual. He told himself he was giving Hazel space. He told himself he was not watching her through the glass as if she might vanish. He took the postcard from his pocket and held it at the steering wheel. The lighthouse in the picture looked exactly like the real one did on fog days. The typed sentence stared back at him. The attorney. Claire. Jack started the truck and drove into town. Port Silas Post Office sat on a corner with peeling white paint and a flag that snapped in the wind. Jack parked across the street and sat with the engine running. He watched people go in and out, heads down against the damp. A man carried a box. A woman hurried with a stack of envelopes. Jack waited until his own nerves were tight enough to hurt. Then he shut off the truck and walked inside. The air smelled like paper and old glue. A bell chimed as he entered. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The line was short. Jack stepped behind a man mailing a fishing rod tube and stared at the bulletin board of lost cats and church bake sales. He felt her before he saw her. Claire stood at the counter 2 windows down, holding a small, padded envelope. Gray coat again, dark hair pinned back. Her posture was controlled, but her shoulders looked like they had not dropped in days. Jack moved forward with the line. The man ahead of him finished and walked away. Claire turned slightly, as if adjusting her stance, and her eyes landed on Jack. Jack raised the postcard so the sentence showed. For a fraction of a second, Claire's face cracked. Not a polite crack, not surprise. Fear. It flashed through her eyes and tightened her mouth. Her fingers clenched around the padded envelope until the paper wrinkled. She looked past Jack toward the door, then toward the windows, checking reflections, checking angles. Jack felt his pulse kick. Claire recovered quickly, her expression smoothed. She gave the postal clerk a tight nod, slid the envelope across the counter, and turned as if Jack was not there. Jack stepped into her path. "Claire," he said quietly. Her eyes flicked to his, then to the postcard, then away. "Mr. Mercer." "You wrote this?" Jack asked. Claire's jaw tightened. "No." Jack held her gaze. "Do you know who did?" Claire's throat moved. "Not here." "You keep saying that," Jack said. His voice was low, controlled, but he could feel the edge. "Where then?" "Because my daughter is being approached by strangers." Claire's eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in calculation. "Do you want her safe?" Jack almost laughed, sharp and humorless. "Of course I do." "Then do not ask questions in a room full of people," Claire said. Her voice stayed calm, but there was steel under it. "Walk out, get in your truck, go home. Pick her up at the end of the day like you always do." Jack's grip tightened on the postcard. "You sound like you know a lot about what I always do." Claire did not answer. She stepped around him. Jack followed her out the door. Outside, wind pushed mist down the street. Cars hissed by on wet asphalt. Claire walked fast, but not panicked. Jack kept pace. "Stop," Jack said. Claire stopped near the corner beside a newspaper box slick with rain. She turned toward him, eyes flat and tired. Jack held up the postcard again. "Someone is telling me you are watching us." Claire looked at the lighthouse picture. Her expression did not soften. It hardened like a person bracing. "Someone wants you to focus on me," she said. Jack stared. "You are standing in front of my kid at a playground. You are showing up where we are. You do not get to act like you are not part of this." Claire's gaze held his, unblinking. "I am part of it," she said. The admission hung between them. It did not explain anything, but it shifted the air. Jack's breath fogged in front of his face. "Why?" Claire's eyes flicked left then right, scanning the street. "Go home," she said again. "Answer me." Claire's mouth tightened. Her right hand moved as if to tuck hair behind her ear, then stopped. Jack noticed it then, the slight tremor in her fingers that she fought to control. Claire spoke without looking away. "If you need a reason to talk to me that does not look like a confrontation, I can help you with something legal." Jack's brow furrowed. Claire continued, voice steady. "People in town have disputes. Insurance companies do not pay. Contractors get blamed. Property lines get messy. Find one of those reasons." Jack stared at her. He understood what she was offering. A door that looked like a door, not an escape hatch. "You are telling me to pretend," he said. "I am telling you to survive," Claire replied. A gull cried overhead, harsh. The ferry horn sounded in the distance, low and long, and the note seemed to settle in Jack's bones. Jack took a slow breath. "Fine," he said. "I have an insurance claim that has been dragging for months." Claire did not react, but her eyes sharpened slightly, like she was listening for the truth inside the lie. Jack added storm damage. "The adjuster keeps stalling." Claire nodded once. "Call my office," she said. "Make an appointment." Jack waited for something more. A name, a confession, an apology, anything that would make the past 3 years feel less like a locked room. Claire gave him none of it. She turned and started walking down the sidewalk, coat hem dampening at the edges. Jack called after her. "Who was that woman at the lighthouse?" Claire did not stop. Someone who should not have been that close, she said, and kept walking. Jack stood in the mist with the postcard in his hand until Claire disappeared into the gray. When he got back to his truck, his palms were damp. He sat behind the wheel and stared at the steering column, trying to steady his breathing. He looked at the postcard one more time. The attorney is not the only one watching. Jack folded it carefully and put it in his wallet behind Hazel's school picture. Then he started the truck and drove towards Cedar Line, arriving early enough to sit in the parking lot and watch the front doors until Hazel came out. When she finally ran to him, cheeks pink from the cold, Jack lifted her into a quick hug that surprised them both. Hazel laughed. "Dad, you are squishing Mr. Blue." Jack set her down, smoothed her hair, and held her hand all the way to the truck. That night, after Hazel fell asleep with her palm on the red stitching, Jack sat at the kitchen table with his phone in front of him. The house was quiet, except for the heater and the soft tick of the wall clock. He pulled the crumpled business card he had pocketed at the lighthouse from his wallet. Claire Wren, attorney at law, a local number printed in black. Jack stared at the digits until they blurred, then he typed them in. He listened to the ringtone twice, and kept his eyes on the dark window over the sink, where fog pressed close enough to look like a presence. The phone rang a third time. Jack kept it to his ear elbow on the kitchen table, eyes on the window over the sink. Fog pressed against the glass in a dull living sheet. The porch light threw a pale cone onto the wet yard. Nothing moved out there, nothing that he could see. A click. A recorded voice, smooth and polite. "You have reached the office of Claire Wren. Please leave your name, number, and a brief message." Jack held his breath for a beat, then let it out slowly through his nose. "This is Jack Mercer," he said. His voice sounded steadier than he felt. "You said you could help with an insurance claim. I want an appointment, tomorrow if possible." He stopped, then added quieter, "And I want to talk." He ended the call and set the phone down face up, as if it might ring back out of sheer stubbornness. He sat there until the screen went dark. Behind him, the house stayed quiet. The heater ticked. The wall clock marked each second with a soft, regular sound. From Hazel's room came the faintest rustle of bed sheets, then stillness again. Jack got up and checked the locks twice. When he finally went to bed, he slept in thin slices. Every time he drifted off, his mind dragged him back by the collar. In one dream, he was at the lighthouse, but the beam did not cut through fog. It cut through smoke. In the morning, his eyes felt gritty. He made Hazel breakfast, drove her to school, then sat in the truck in the parking lot longer than usual. Kids ran past jackets bright against the gray day. Parents waved, laughed, complained about the weather. Jack watched the fence line across the street until the bell rang and the last stragglers slipped inside. He looked down at his phone. No missed calls, no messages. He started the truck, drove to his shop, and worked with more force than he needed. He tightened screws too hard. He sanded until the wood went glassy. His mind kept circling the same questions. Why did Claire offer help like a warning? Why did she show up at the lighthouse at the exact right moment? Why did that postcard exist at all? At 10:15, his phone rang. Jack wiped his hands on a rag and answered on the second ring. "Hello." A pause. Then a woman's voice, calm and measured. "Mr. Mercer." Jack's stomach tightened. "Claire." Another pause. He could hear faint office sounds on her end, paper shifting, a printer whirring someone's footsteps on wood. "You called last night," Claire said. "I did. You left 2 messages." Jack frowned. He had left one. "Did I?" Claire did not correct him. Her voice stayed even. "If you want to discuss an insurance dispute, my office can see you Thursday at 4. "This Thursday?" Jack asked. "Yes." Jack's mind ran through the week like a list of tools. Thursday. Hazel had art club after school. He could pick her up and bring her, or he could ask Mara to watch her. The thought of leaving Hazel with anyone else made his throat tighten. "I'll be there," Jack said. "And I'm bringing my daughter." Silence. Then Claire said, "That's fine." Jack leaned on the workbench, fingers gripping the edge. "Was that your postcard?" "No." "Do you know who put it in my mailbox?" Claire breathed out slowly, as if she was counting. "Discuss your insurance claim on Thursday," she said. "Nothing else on the phone." "Why?" Jack pressed. "Why are you scared of a phone call?" "I'm not scared," Claire replied, and the words landed too fast, too sharp for a woman who claimed calm. Jack said, "All right, Thursday." 4 o'clock, Claire repeated. The line went dead. Jack stared at the phone screen. He could see his reflection in it, faint and warped. Behind him, the shop smelled like cedar and old varnish. Outside, rain tapped the roof in a steady, patient rhythm. He went home at lunch and pulled out his insurance paperwork. Storm damage from last winter. A section of roof shingles, torn off water intrusion along the back wall. the adjuster stalling for months, with polite excuses and missing forms. Jack had kept every email, every photo, every note. He had done what Rowan used to do: document everything. Do not assume anyone will be fair. He stacked the papers neatly in a folder and slid it into his bag. He hesitated, then added a small notebook and a pen. Not because he needed them for the claim, but because writing things down made him feel less helpless. Thursday came cold and wet. At 3:30, Jack picked Hazel up from Cedar Line. She ran to the truck with her backpack bouncing and Mr. Blue tucked under her arm. Her cheeks were pink from recess. Her eyes were bright. "Where are we going?" she asked as she climbed in. "An office," Jack said, buckling her seatbelt. "I need help with some paperwork." Hazel made a face. "Paperwork is boring." "Sometimes boring keeps the lights on," Jack said. Hazel studied him. "Are you going to see the lady?" Jack kept his eyes on the road. "Yes." Hazel did not look scared. She looked curious, which was somehow worse. Curiosity made kids reach for things they should not touch. They drove into town past the waterfront, past the post office, past the bait shop with a faded sign. Claire's office sat above a closed antique store on Main Street. The building was old, 2 stories of weathered clapboard, the paint a tired cream color. A narrow staircase climbed along the sideboards, darkened by rain. Jack parked across the street and sat for a moment with his hands on the wheel. Hazel pointed. "That one?" "Yes." Hazel hugged Mr. Blue. "Simu, any power blue. He can come to birth. He could come too." Jack almost smiled. "He's always invited." They crossed the street. Jack held Hazel's hand, not because she needed it to cross, but because he needed the contact warm and small and real. The wind smelled like fish and wet rope. Somewhere down by the docks, a gull screamed like it was offended by the world. They climbed the stairs. Each step creaked. The wood felt slick under Jack's boots. At the landing, a frosted glass door had black lettering that read Wren Law. Jack knocked once. A woman's voice called, "Come in." The office was small and neat, but not stylish. The air smelled faintly of coffee that had sat too long in a pot. A space heater hummed near the baseboard. A row of law books lined one shelf, spines worn names stamped in gold. On the wall hung framed certificates and a photograph of a city skyline Jack did not recognize. Claire stood behind a desk that looked older than the building. She wore a dark blouse, and the same gray coat from the lighthouse was gone, replaced by a blazer that fit like armor. Her hair was pinned back again, every strand controlled. Her eyes went to Hazel first. Hazel held Mr. Blue up like an introduction. "Hi." Claire's face shifted just slightly. Not a smile, not exactly. Something softer than gone.
"Hello, Hazel Claire."
Jack's chest tightened. He had not told Claire Hazel's name on the phone. Hazel blinked. "You remembered." Claire's gaze flicked to Jack, then back to Hazel. "You told me at the park," she said. Hazel nodded, satisfied. Kids were like that. They accepted the easiest answer if it sounded confident. Jack did not accept it. Claire gestured toward a worn leather chair in the corner. "You can sit there if you want," she said to Hazel. "I have some paper and crayons." She opened a desk drawer and pulled out a box of crayons and a small notepad already in her hand, as if it had been waiting. Hazel's eyes lit up. "Can I draw the lighthouse again?" "Yes," Claire said. Hazel hurried to the chair and curled her legs under herself. Mr. Blue sat beside her, his faded blue fur pressed against the leather. She started drawing, immediately tongue between her teeth in concentration. Jack set his folder on Claire's desk. "Insurance claim," he said. "Storm damage. They keep stalling." Claire sat and opened the folder. Her movements were efficient. She did not waste motion. She did not waste words. "Policy number," she said, scanning. "Date of loss. Photos." Jack watched her read. He watched her eyes move across the page and land on details the adjuster claimed to miss. For a few minutes it could have been normal. A man, a lawyer, a boring dispute. Then Claire's right hand trembled. It was small, just a faint shake as she picked up a pen. She seemed to notice it too. Her fingers tightened until the tremor steadied, then she wrote a note in the margin with crisp, controlled strokes. Jack leaned back in the chair across from her. He let silence sit between them, not comfortable, but deliberate. Claire did not look up. "They requested a second inspection," she asked. "Yes," Jack said. "Then they did not show." Claire nodded once and kept writing. Jack said, "You told me not to ask questions on the phone." Claire's pen paused for a beat, then continued. "That's correct." Jack kept his voice level. Why did you show up at the lighthouse? Claire's jaw tightened. She flipped a page too quickly, paper cracking. Your claim, she said, voice still professional. The carrier is out of Seattle. Their internal process is slow. Jack stared at her. Claire. She finally looked up. Her eyes were steady, but there was something behind them, a strain like a wire pulled too tight. She held his gaze for half a second, then her eyes dropped back to the documents. Jack said softly, You keep avoiding my face. Claire's pen moved again. I'm reviewing the file. You know I'm not talking about paperwork. Claire did not answer. From the corner, Hazel's crayon scratched softly on paper. She hummed under her breath, a tune Jack recognized from a cartoon. The sound made the room feel less like a trap. Claire cleared her throat. If you sign here, I can request the full adjuster notes and force a timeline, she said. She slid a form across the desk toward Jack, without meeting his eyes. Jack picked up the paper. His name sat in printed letters above a blank line. He held the pen but did not sign yet. Do you have kids, he asked. Claire's eyes lifted quick and sharp. No. Jack watched her face. The answer came too clean. Hazel looked up from her drawing. Miss Wren? Claire's head turned toward her instantly. Too fast, like a reflex. Hazel held up her paper. Is this beam too big? Claire stood and walked over heels, tapping the wood floor. She crouched beside Hazel's chair and pointed with one finger. If you make it thinner at the top and wider where it hits the water, it will look like light, she said. Hazel nodded seriously and adjusted her drawing. Jack watched Claire crouch beside his daughter, close enough that Hazel's elbow brushed Claire's sleeve, close enough that Claire could have touched Hazel's hair. Claire did not touch her. She kept her hands to herself, but her focus was intense, almost hungry, like a person trying to memorize something before it vanished. Hazel's eyes flicked up to Claire's face. Why do you look like you're going to cry? Hazel asked. Jack's breath caught. Claire froze. Her finger stayed on the paper. Her throat moved with a swallow. I'm not going to cry, Claire said, voice careful. Hazel frowned. You are, though. Claire's lips pressed together. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. Sometimes people look sad when they're thinking, she said. Hazel considered that, then nodded like it made sense. She went back to coloring. Claire stood. As she turned, her eyes met Jack's. For a moment, she looked caught. Not guilty like a thief. Caught like a person standing in the wrong place at the wrong time with a secret in their pocket. Jack said very quietly, Have we met before? Claire's face went still. She held his gaze longer this time, and he saw the fear again, sharp and real, like the flash he had seen at the post office when he raised the postcard. Her voice came out low. No. Jack did not blink. You answered too fast. Claire's shoulders lifted and fell in a controlled breath. Sign the form, Mr. Mercer. Jack looked down at the paper. Then he signed his name with a steady hand that surprised him. Claire took the form back and returned to her desk. She filed it neatly on top of the stack. She picked up the pen again. The tremor returned for a split second, then vanished under pressure. Give me 3 days, she said. I'll send a letter. Certified. They'll respond. Jack nodded, but his mind was no longer on shingles or water stains. And the postcard, he asked. Claire's pen stopped. She did not look up. You should keep it, she said. I am, Jack replied. Claire's voice stayed even. Do not show it around town. Jack leaned forward. Tell me one thing, he said. Just one. Was the woman at the lighthouse working with you? Claire's eyes lifted. Her expression was tight, controlled, but not blank. No, she said. This time the answer had weight. And she should not have known your daughter's name. Jack's stomach turned cold. Hazel yawned in the corner and hugged Mr. Blue against her chest. Her palm rested on the red stitching like it was a worry stone. Jack stood. We're done, he said. Claire gathered the documents, slid them into a folder, and handed it back. Their fingers did not touch. At the door, Jack paused with his hand on the knob. He looked back. Claire was already standing near her desk, eyes on Hazel, not on him. Her face held that same careful attention Jack could not stop noticing. Protective, yes. Also burdened, as if she was watching the edge of a knife. Hazel waved. Bye, Miss Wren. Claire nodded once. Goodbye, Hazel. Jack opened the door and led Hazel out into the damp air. The stairwell smelled like wet wood. They walked down step by step, Hazel hopping the last one like it was a game. Jack kept his hand on her shoulder until her boots hit the sidewalk. Across the street, the waterfront was a smear of gray. A ferry horn sounded low and long, and the note slid through the fog like a warning that had nowhere to land. Jack buckled Hazel into the truck. She held up her drawing. The lighthouse beam was thinner now, brighter, cutting through fog with stubborn certainty. Claire helped, Hazel said. Jack started the engine. Yeah, he answered, voice tight. She did. Jack drove with both hands on the wheel, Knuckles' pale eyes fixed on the wet road as if it could answer him. Hazel sat in the passenger seat, with her drawing on her lap. Mr. Blue was tucked tight against her ribs, his faded fur darkened at the edges from years of love. Every so often Hazel glanced at Jack, then looked away again like she was trying not to poke a bruise. "Did I do something wrong?" she asked. Jack kept his voice gentle. "No bug. You were quiet in there. I was thinking." Hazel traced the lighthouse beam with her fingertip. "Miss Wren makes the light look real." Jack swallowed. The heater blew warm air that smelled faintly of old dust. Outside, Port Silas slid past in gray strips, the bait shop, the diner, the shuttered antique store below Claire's office. People moved with their heads down, collars up, living inside the weather. At home, Hazel ran to the kitchen for a snack. Jack watched her like he could not help it, as if she might dissolve into fog the second he blinked. She opened the cupboard, asked for peanut butter again, then laughed at herself like it was a joke they shared. Jack nodded along, but his mind kept replaying the office. The crayons already in the drawer, Claire saying Hazel's name like it belonged in her mouth. The tremor in Claire's hand, the way she scanned the street outside the post office, the way she told him to survive like it was a legal instruction. That night, Jack tried to fix the seam on Mr. Blue. Hazel sat cross-legged on the living room rug with a pile of picture books and watched him with solemn interest. Jack held the toy under the lamp and ran his thumb along the red stitching. The fabric was worn thin, soft as a shirt sleeve. That hard ridge under the seam was still there, stubborn, and it pressed against his thumb like a small bone. "Careful," Hazel said. "I am," Jack replied. He found the tiniest loose thread and tugged. The seam held. Whatever was inside stayed hidden. Jack let go and set the toy back in Hazel's lap. Hazel hugged it, immediate relief in her shoulders. "It's okay," she whispered to the beaver, then looked up at Jack. "Don't take his tummy apart." Jack forced a smile. "I won't tonight." He lay awake after Hazel fell asleep, listening to the house sigh and click. Rain ticked against the window. The ferry horn sounded once distant and low, then the town settled again. Jack stared at the ceiling and thought about the postcard folded behind Hazel's school picture in his wallet. The sentence on it felt like a finger tapping his spine. "The attorney is not the only one watching." On Friday morning, Claire emailed him a draft letter to the insurance carrier. It was crisp, polite, and sharp in the places that mattered. Jack read it twice. The words were about shingles and timelines, but he could not stop seeing the subtext in every line. She wrote like a woman used to fighting people with power and money, like a woman who knew how to apply pressure without raising her voice. He replied with a simple thank you and attached 2 additional photos of the damage. After he hit send, he sat at the kitchen table with his phone face down and felt the familiar urge to do something, anything that made him feel less pinned. By Sunday, the rain had eased to a fine mist. Hazel played on the living room floor, building a lighthouse out of blocks. Jack tried to sand a plank for a boat repair, but his attention kept drifting. He called Mara and asked if she could watch Hazel for an hour on Monday afternoon. Mara paused on the line. "Is everything okay?" Jack stared at the charred strip of timber in the corner of his shop, the one he kept like a wound he refused to bandage. "Yeah," he said. "I just need to run an errand." Mara did not press. "Bring her by after school. I'll make cocoa." Jack thanked her and hung up. Monday afternoon, he picked Hazel up from Cedar Line and drove her to Mara's place. Hazel ran inside without hesitation. Mara's kitchen smelled like cinnamon and bread. Hazel's laughter floated out as Jack turned back toward Main Street. Claire's office sat above the antique store windows, fogged at the edges. Jack climbed the stairs and knocked. His heart was beating too hard for a man delivering roof photos. Claire opened the door almost immediately. No coat this time, just the blazer-clean lines, hair pinned back. Her face was composed, but her eyes flicked once to the stairwell behind him, then to the street, then back to his face. "You forgot something?" she asked. Jack held up a manila envelope. "More documentation, for the claim." Claire stepped aside. "Come in." The office smelled the same as before, coffee and paper, and a faint chemical tang from a copier. Claire took the envelope from him and set it on her desk. She did not invite him to sit. Jack did not sit anyway. Claire pulled out the contents and scanned them with quick eyes. "Good," she said. "This helps." Jack watched her hands. They were steady now. The tremor did not show. He said, "You told me not to talk on the phone. You told me not to ask questions in public. You told me to survive." Claire's eyes lifted for a moment, then dropped back to the papers. "I told you what was true." Jack took a slow step closer. "Why did the woman at the park know my daughter's name?" Claire's pen paused above a notepad. She wrote anyway, as if she could scribble the question away. "I don't know." Jack held his ground. Do you know who she was? Claire's jaw tightened. No. Jack's voice stayed low, but it was cutting now. You are lying, or you are very bad at your job. Claire looked up. The air in the small room sharpened. You came here for insurance paperwork, she said. I came here because you keep showing up near my kid, Jack replied. Bye, kid. Claire stared at him for a long beat. Her expression did not flare. It cooled. That calm was almost worse. You should pick Hazel up, she said quietly. Do not keep her waiting. Jack felt his throat tighten. You know where she is. Claire did not answer. She slid the photos into a folder and set it atop a neat stack. Then she moved to her desk drawer and pulled out a small slip of paper. This is the reference number for the letter. If the carrier calls you, give them this. Jack took it. Her fingers did not touch his. He stood there a second longer, waiting for her to offer something else. She did not. Jack turned to leave. At the door, he paused and pretended to check his phone thumb moving across a dark screen. He angled his body so he could see the office in the reflection of the glass frame. He watched Claire cross to a heavy filing cabinet in the corner. She opened a drawer and slid a thick folder inside with practiced speed, too quick for someone filing ordinary roof photos. Jack caught a glimpse of the tab before the drawer shut. Not his name, a case number. And beneath it for a heartbeat, a photograph. The image punched the air out of him. Hazel, about 3 years old, standing in a yellow raincoat with the hood up. Her cheeks were round, her smile missing one front tooth she had chipped on the coffee table. Behind her was their old house, the porch rails still intact, the siding clean before the night it turned into a furnace. Jack's vision narrowed. His ears rang. The office lights seemed to hum louder. That photo was from Rowan's laptop, the one that melted into black slag in the fire, the one he had held in his hands afterward until it burned his palms. Claire shut the drawer and turned. Her eyes landed on Jack. For a fraction of a second, her composure slipped. A flicker of alarm crossed her face, like she had seen her own shadow move wrong. Jack did not speak. He did not need to. His expression said enough. Claire's voice came out controlled. Mr. Mercer. Jack's mouth was dry. How he managed. How do you have that? Claire's gaze darted toward the door, then back. You should go. Jack felt anger rise hot and clean. I'm not going anywhere. Claire took a step toward him. Not here. Jack laughed once, low and humorless. That's your favorite sentence. Claire's eyes tightened. Please. Jack held her gaze. That picture should not exist. Claire's throat moved with a swallow. She was careful with her next words, like each one had teeth. Leave, she said again, softer. I will call you. Jack stared at her. No. Claire's eyes hardened. If you care about Hazel, you will walk out and pick her up. Right now. The mention of Hazel shifted something inside him, cold water on flame. Jack turned, walked out, and went down the stairs with legs that felt too heavy. The sky had darkened by the time he drove to Mara's. Mist hung low over Main Street, turning streetlights into blurry halos. Hazel ran out with cocoa on her breath and a smear of chocolate on her upper lip. Mara says I can have mini marshmallows, she announced. Jack buckled her in and drove home with his hands shaking just enough that he had to squeeze the steering wheel to steady them. At home, Hazel watched a cartoon while Jack moved through the kitchen like a sleepwalker. He put away groceries that did not need to be put away. He wiped a counter that was already clean. His mind kept returning to the photo like a tongue worrying a bad tooth. When Hazel finally fell asleep, her hand on Mr. Blue's red stitching, Jack sat at the kitchen table and stared at his phone until his eyes burned. No call came. By the next afternoon, Jack was done waiting. He picked Hazel up from school and took her with him into town. He told her they were dropping off more paperwork. Hazel accepted this with a shrug and clutched Mr. Blue like a passport. Claire's office was dark when they arrived. The antique store below was closed. Lights off sign flipped to closed. Jack checked the time, 5:20. He had missed her. He stood on the sidewalk, jaw clenched, looking up at the second-floor windows. A faint glow appeared behind the blinds. Movement. Someone inside. Jack took Hazel's hand and went up. He knocked. No answer. He knocked again. The door opened a crack. Claire's face appeared, shadowed hair, still pinned, but looser than usual. Her eyes widened when she saw Hazel. Jack, she said, voice tight. Hazel waved polite. Hi. Claire's gaze held on Hazel a beat too long, then snapped back to Jack. You should not be here. Jack stepped forward. We need to talk. Claire's fingers tightened on the door edge. Not with her. Jack's voice stayed low. You already have her picture in your files. Don't act like she's a stranger. Claire's face went pale, then set. She opened the door fully and let them in. Inside, the office felt smaller than before. The air was stale, like the room had been holding its breath. Claire turned the lock, then faced Jack. Jack did not sit. He did not offer small talk. That photo, he said. Explain it. Claire's lips parted, then closed. Her eyes flicked to Hazel, who had drifted toward the leather chair and climbed into it without being asked. She set Mr. Blue in her lap and looked between the adults with quiet attention. Claire spoke carefully. The file is not what you think. Jack's laugh was sharp. Then tell me what to think. Claire's right hand trembled just once, then clenched into stillness. I did not take that photo from you, she said. I did not break into your house. I did not steal anything. Jack leaned closer. How do you have it, Claire? Claire's voice dropped. Someone gave me the file years ago. Jack's eyes narrowed. Who? Claire shook her head once. I can't say. Jack's anger flared again. You can't or you won't. Claire's gaze held his with a tired intensity. I'm trying to keep you safe, she said. Hazel's voice cut in small and clear. Are you my mom's friend? The question landed like a dropped glass. Claire went still. Her eyes shifted to Hazel, and something raw moved across her face. Grief that she tried to bury and failed. Her throat worked. Jack stepped beside Hazel's chair, protective one hand on her shoulder. Answer her, he said. Claire's voice came out rough, barely above a whisper. I knew her, she said. Hazel stared wide-eyed. You knew my mom. Claire nodded once, very small. Jack's chest tightened. How, he demanded. From where? Claire's eyes shimmered, but no tears fell. She looked like a woman holding herself upright by force alone. Not here, she said again, and the words sounded less like a tactic and more like fear. Jack's jaw clenched. You keep using that. Claire took a step back as if distance could protect her. You need to go home. Jack's voice rose, then he forced it back down. No. You are going to tell me why you have my daughter's photo. You are going to tell me why strangers ask her where she lives. You are going to tell me why you keep appearing in our lives like a shadow. Claire's gaze flicked to the window, to the blinds, to the streetlight glow outside. Her breath shortened. I can't do this, she said. Jack moved toward her. Then I will go to the sheriff. Claire's face tightened. You think the sheriff can protect you from this? Jack froze. The word this hung in the air, heavy and undefined. Hazel hugged Mr. Blue closer. Her fingers pressed into the red stitching like she was trying to hold something together. Claire looked at Hazel again, and her expression shifted, as if Hazel's face made a decision for her. She swallowed hard. I am not your enemy, she said, voice thick, but you have to trust me enough to leave right now. Jack stared at her, breathing hard. His hands curled at his sides. Claire reached for the folder stack on her desk, then stopped herself like even touching paper might make it worse. She opened the office door and stepped aside an invitation that felt like an order. Jack's anger burned, but Hazel's small hand found his wrist warm and steady. Dad, Hazel said softly. Jack looked down at her. Hazel's eyes were serious, not scared, not yet, just waiting. Jack swallowed and nodded once. He took Hazel's hand and walked them out. Claire closed the door behind them with a quiet click. On the stairs, Hazel asked, Is she going to cry? Jack did not answer. Outside, mist clung to Main Street. The streetlights turned it into milk. Jack guided Hazel to the truck and buckled her in. He sat behind the wheel for a moment without starting the engine. His pulse thudded in his throat. Hazel hugged Mr. Bultebor. And stared out the window. Jack started the truck and drove home, the image of that impossible photograph burning bright in his mind as if someone had held it too close to flame. The drive home felt longer than it was. Fog hugged the streetlights and turned every halo soft. Hazel sat quiet in the passenger seat forehead, near the window watching the wet blur of town slide past. Mr. Blue was pinned tight to her chest. Her fingers kept finding the red stitching, pressing and releasing, like she was checking a pulse. Jack kept seeing the photograph in Claire's cabinet, not the image itself, the fact of it, the way it had flashed into view and then been swallowed by a drawer, a proof that the past was not finished with them. At home, Hazel kicked off her boots by the door and padded to the kitchen. She asked for peanut butter again, like she was trying to plant a normal flag in the middle of a day that felt wrong. Jack gave her an apple too. He cut it into slices and set them on a plate. He kept his hands steady. He kept his face calm. Hazel climbed onto her chair and ate slowly. She watched him between bites. You're mad, she said. Jack kept his back to her and rinsed a glass that did not need rinsing. No. Hazel frowned. That's your no voice. Jack turned and leaned on the counter. The kitchen light made her hair look warmer than it was. Her cheeks were still pink from the cold. She looked like a kid. Just a kid. I'm not mad at you, he said. I'm mad at grown-ups. Hazel seemed to accept that. She nudged Mr. Blue's head with her chin. Miss Wren is a grown-up. Jack did not answer right away. He walked to the window and looked out at their small yard. Wet grass, the neighbor's fence. Nothing moving except a branch shifting in wind. Hazel's voice came softer. Is she going to make you sad too? Jack turned back. Hazel's eyes were serious. She asked questions like she was carrying a bowl of water and trying not to spill. Jack crossed the kitchen and brushed his thumb over her forehead. No, he said. Nobody gets to do that. Hazel leaned into his hand for a second, then pulled away and took another apple slice. Dinner was quick, macaroni and cheese from a box. Jack hated that he was giving her the easiest meal like he had run out of energy for effort. Hazel did not complain. She ate, then asked if she could watch a show. Jack nodded and sat on the couch beside her. The cartoon voices filled the room. Bright colors, laugh tracks, the kind of noise that tried to convince you nothing bad lived outside the frame. Jack kept listening for sounds under it. A car door, gravel crunching, footsteps on the porch. Nothing came. When the episode ended, Hazel yawned and rubbed her eyes with the back of her fist. Jack carried her to bed even though she was old enough to walk. She curled against his shoulder, with a tired little sigh that made his chest ache. In her room, the nightlight threw a pink glow over the wall. Hazel's blankets were tangled from the way she slept all elbows and knees. Jack set her down gently and tucked the covers around her. Hazel held Mr. Blue under her chin. The toy's fur was worn thin at the ears. The red stitching caught the nightlight like a small scar. Dad, Hazel whispered. Yeah, Bug. Are you going to yell at Miss Wren again? Jack smoothed the blanket. I'm not going to yell. Hazel's eyes stayed on him. You did the quiet yell. Jack let out a slow breath. I'm trying to keep you safe. Hazel nodded once, serious as a judge. Me too. Jack blinked. You are... Hazel hugged Mr. Bloop, Mr. Tighter. I don't tell strangers stuff. Jack's throat tightened. He kissed her forehead. Good. He turned off the overhead light and left the nightlight on. At the door, he paused and looked back. Hazel's eyes were already closing. Her hand rested on the red stitching like that was the place that held the world together. In the hallway, Jack checked the locks. Front door, back door, the window latch over the sink. He moved quietly, trying not to make the house feel like a bunker. Then he went to the kitchen and sat at the table with his phone in front of him. He did not call Claire. He did not call the sheriff. He stared at the screen and tried to decide which version of his life was real, the quiet one with school pickups and peanut butter, or the one with a file cabinet holding an impossible photograph. The house settled around him. The heater clicked on and off. The wall clock kept time like it did not care what it was measuring. Jack finally went to bed, but sleep did not come easily. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Hazel in that yellow raincoat. He saw the porch behind her clean and intact. He saw fire licking the edge of that memory. At 11:47, someone pounded on the front door. Not a neighbor knock, not a wrong house knock. It was urgent, heavy, fast. Jack was out of bed before the second burst of fists hit wood. His heart hammered in his throat. He grabbed the aluminum bat he kept beside the dresser, the one he bought after the fire, and told himself he would never need. He moved down the hallway barefoot, the floor cold under his feet. He passed Hazel's door and paused long enough to listen. No crying, no movement, just the soft hum of her nightlight through the crack at the bottom. The pounding stopped. Silence rushed in like water. Jack reached the front door and pressed his eye to the peephole. The porch light washed the small space in pale yellow. The porch was empty. The railing glistened with moisture. The steps were dark and wet. Nothing. Jack tightened his grip on the bat and opened the door slowly. Cold air rolled in. Fog pressed up to the porch like a wall. He stepped out, bat raised, and scanned left and right. The street was empty except for a single streetlight down the block. Its glow fell onto wet pavement and made long shadows that did not connect to anything. Then he saw her. Claire Wren stood at the edge of his driveway, half in shadow hair coming loose from its pin. Her coat was unbuttoned. She looked like she had been running, breath coming in sharp pulls that turned white in the cold air. Her eyes were fixed on the far end of the street, not on Jack. Jack's first reaction was anger, hot and quick. His second was a chill that moved up his spine. What are you doing here? He demanded. Claire held up one hand without looking at him, palm out. Not surrender, not exactly, more like a signal to wait. Someone was at your door, she said. Her voice was low and tight, a figure in dark clothes. I saw them from my car down the block. Jack's mouth went dry. You were parked down the block. Claire finally turned her head enough to glance at him. Her eyes were wide and alert, all the softness from earlier gone. Yes. Why? Jack snapped. Why are you watching my house in the middle of the night? Claire looked past him toward the porch. Because you are not the only one being watched, she said. Jack felt the bat tremble in his grip. He forced his fingers to tighten until the shake stopped. Did you chase them? Claire nodded once. They ran when I got out. I followed on foot for half a block. I lost them near the corner by the hedge line. Jack stared down the street. Fog swallowed the intersection. The world ended in gray. You want me to believe this, he said. Claire's jaw tightened. I do not care what you believe. I care that someone felt comfortable enough to stand on your porch. Jack's voice came out rough. And you felt comfortable enough to sit in your car near my house. Claire's eyes flicked to his bare feet on the wet wood, then to the bat. You are armed. You are awake. That is good, she said, like she was checking boxes. Jack took one step closer to the edge of the porch. Who are they, Claire? Claire breathed in slow and looked back down the street again. I do not have a name. Jack let out a bitter laugh. You never have a name? Claire's gaze snapped to him. Do you want to argue, or do you want to keep your daughter alive? The words landed hard. Jack's throat worked. He opened his mouth to answer, and Hazel's door creaked behind him. Dad. Jack turned. Hazel stood in the doorway in pink pajamas, Mr. Blue clutched to her chest. Her eyes were wide in the porch light spill. Her hair was mussed from sleep. She looked small and pale against the dark hallway behind her. Jack's heart lurched. Hazel, he said sharp, go back inside. Hazel took one step onto the porch, and her gaze found Claire. She froze. Claire's face changed. Not much, just enough. Her shoulders softened a fraction, then locked again, as if she remembered where she was. Hazel's voice shook. She's here. Jack moved fast and scooped Hazel up against his side. He wrapped one arm around her and kept the bat lowered but ready. Hazel's fingers dug into his sweatshirt. Mr. Blue's blue fur pressed into Jack's ribs. Hazel's breath came quick and shallow. Claire spoke gently for the first time since arriving. Hazel, go inside, please. Hazel's eyes stayed on Claire. You came because of the bad person, Hazel whispered. Claire nodded once. Yes. Hazel swallowed. Daddy, I saw the black car again today. Jack's body went rigid. What? Hazel's voice became a rush like she had been holding it back. At recess, by the fence, the same one, the big one with dark windows. Jack stared at her. His mind flashed to the ferry line, the dark SUV 2 cars back. Clean, tall, tinted glass. Hazel kept talking. It was just sitting there, like it was waiting. Jack's grip tightened around her. Why did you not tell me? Hazel's eyes filled with tears, slow and shiny. Because you were already mad. Jack's chest cracked open with guilt. He pressed his lips to her hair. I'm not mad at you, he said. Never at you. Claire's eyes tracked the street again, scanning for movement. How long have you noticed it? She asked, Hazel, voice steady. Hazel wiped her nose on her sleeve. A lot, she said. Sometimes it is a different car. Sometimes it is the same. Jack felt something cold settle in his stomach. Different cars. Same feeling. He looked up at Claire. You knew about this. Claire did not deny it. She did not confirm either. She said, bring her inside. Jack backed into the house with Hazel in his arms. Claire followed to the porch, but did not step in until Jack unlocked the door wider. She paused at the threshold like she was checking for wires, for listening ears, for anything that could turn a warm room into a trap. Inside, the house smelled like soap, and old wood, and Hazel's strawberry shampoo. It should have felt safe. It did not. Jack set Hazel down in the living room and turned on a lamp. The light was warm and wrong for the hour. Hazel sat on the couch and pulled a blanket around her shoulders, Mr. Blue tucked under her chin. Jack stood between Hazel and the front door, still holding the bat. Talk, he said to Claire. Now. Claire kept her coat on. Her hair had fallen partly loose. She looked younger in the harsh light and more exhausted. Her eyes had the flat shine of someone who had been awake too long on purpose. There is someone else out there, she said. Someone who has been tracking you, tracking her. Jack's voice was hard. How long? Claire's mouth tightened. Longer than you want to hear. Jack stared at her. The bat felt heavy now, like a tool meant for a job it could not do. Hazel's voice came small from the couch. Are they going to burn our house? Jack's breath caught. He looked at Hazel. Her eyes were locked on him, trying to read the answer before he spoke it. Jack forced his voice gentle. No, he said. No one is burning anything. Claire's gaze flicked to Hazel, pain flashing across her face, like a quick shadow. We are not letting that happen, she said. Jack turned back to Claire. You keep saying we. Claire held his eyes. Because I am in it, she said. Whether you like me or not. Jack took a step toward her. Then tell me the truth. All of it. Claire's throat moved. She looked down for a second, then up again. I am trying, she said. Her voice was rougher now. I have been trying to identify who is watching you and why. They are careful. They do not get caught on purpose. Jack's hands clenched on the bat. And you, he said. You follow us too. Claire did not flinch. Yes. Jack laughed once sharp. So you are a watcher watching a watcher. Claire's eyes stayed steady. I am the reason someone ran off your porch tonight instead of coming inside. Silence filled the room. Hazel's breathing was loud and the quiet quick and shallow. Jack looked at Hazel, then back at Claire. He wanted to believe Claire because believing gave him a shape to fight. He also wanted to hate her because hate was simpler than fear. He asked, what do they want? Claire's face tightened. Her, she said, and the word came out like it hurt to say. Hazel's fingers found the red stitching and pressed hard. Jack felt the floor tilt under him just a little. He held onto the bat because it was something solid. He held onto Hazel's presence because it was everything. He looked at Claire and saw something he had not allowed himself to see before. Not just secrecy, terror, not for herself, for the child on his couch. Outside, the fog pressed against the windows. The fairy horn sounded once distant and low, and the note slid through the night like a warning nobody could ignore. Jack stood in the living room, with the bat still in his hand, like it was the only honest thing in the room. Her, he repeated quieter. Claire did not look away. Her eyes were fixed on Hazel, then on the front windows, then back to Hazel again. She watched the glass the way a sailor watched water for a shift in current. Jack lowered the bat, but he did not set it down. What does that mean? He said. They want to talk to her. They want to scare her. They want to take her. Which one is it? Claire's mouth tightened. It means your daughter is the reason they stay close, she said. It means they do not leave you alone. Hazel pulled the blanket up to her chin. Her voice came thin. Did I do something bad? No, Jack said immediately. He crossed to the couch and crouched in front of her. He took her hands in his. They were cold. You did nothing wrong. Hazel's eyes shimmered. Then why? Jack looked over his shoulder at Claire. Answer her. Claire's throat moved as she swallowed. It has nothing to do with you being bad, she said to Hazel. Her voice softened, but it was careful, like she was trying not to step on glass. Sometimes grown-ups make choices that pull other people into trouble. Hazel's fingers dug into the red stitching on Mr. Blue's belly. My mom, she whispered. Claire's face flinched so fast it almost did not count. Then she nodded once, small. Your mom was brave, she said. Jack felt the words hit his chest like a shove. He stood and faced Claire again. You said someone ran off my porch because you were there, he said. Why are you there in the first place? Claire's gaze flicked to him. Because you are not invisible, she said. Because your routine is easy to learn. Because they have time. Jack's jaw clenched. And you? How did you learn my routine? Claire did not answer right away. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out her phone. The screen was cracked at one corner. She held it up not as a threat, but as proof of something practical. I have eyes, she said. I have been trying to keep those eyes on the right things. Jack stepped closer. Who are the right things? Claire's shoulders lifted with a slow breath. Not your neighbors, she said. Not the people who wave at you at the market. Not the school's teachers at Cedarline. Then who? Jack pressed. Claire looked at Hazel again, and that look was a decision. She moved toward the front window and parted the curtain with 2 fingers, just enough to look out. The street was empty. Fog made the streetlight glow look like a bruise. She let the curtain fall back into place and turned to Jack. I do not have a name that you can use, she said. Not yet. Jack's laugh came out sharp. Not here, not now, not yet. You talk like a lock. Claire's eyes hardened. And you talk like a man who thinks anger is a plan. Jack felt heat rise up his neck. He shoved it down. Hazel was watching. Hazel always watched. Claire's voice dropped. Keep your doors locked, she said. Keep your phone on. Do not let Hazel walk to school. Do not let her play outside alone. If someone approaches her again, you leave. You do not argue, you leave. Jack stared at her. That is your whole truth, he said. Instructions. Claire's face tightened. It is the part I can say in this room. Jack took a breath and forced his voice calm. Then say the part you can only say outside. Claire's gaze flicked to Hazel. Hazel's eyes were wide but dry now. She was listening like a little adult. Claire hesitated, then shook her head. Not with her awake, she said. Hazel sat up straighter. I can go to bed, she offered quickly, as if bed was a job she could do to fix the room. Jack's chest squeezed. You are not the problem, he told her. Hazel's voice shook. I know. She slid off the couch, dragging the blanket behind her like a cape. Mr. Blue was clutched tight. She padded down the hallway and paused at her bedroom door. Dad, she said, turning back, can you check the closet? Jack nodded. I will. Hazel disappeared into her room and shut the door with a careful click. The house felt smaller without her in the room. Jack looked at Claire. "Talk," he said. Claire's shoulders dropped a fraction, like she had been holding herself upright by force alone. "I am going to leave," she said. "I should not be here long." Jack stepped into her space. "You show up at my house at midnight, and you are going to leave without telling me why you have my daughter's photo." Claire's eyes flashed. "Because it is dangerous for you to know everything at once." Jack stared at her. "My wife died in a fire," he said. "Danger already happened." Claire's seas went still. Her lips parted, then pressed together again. She looked like a woman biting down on something that wanted to spill out. Jack held her gaze. "Tell me one true thing you have not told me yet." Claire's jaw worked. "The person on your porch tonight was not a random," she said. "They were testing you." Jack felt his stomach drop. Testing for what? Claire's voice went quieter. "For your reactions, for your timing, for where you keep your daughter." Jack's hands curled into fists. "And you did what?" "You sat in your car and watched them watch me." Claire's eyes held his. "I watched you," she said. "And I watched them." Jack leaned in. "How long?" he asked again, and this time his voice sounded like a plea he hated. Claire's throat moved with a swallow. "Long enough," she said. Jack stared at her for a long beat, then turned away before he did something stupid. He walked down the hallway to Hazel's room. He knocked softly. "Come in," Hazel whispered. She sat on her bed with the blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Mr. Blue was in her lap. The nightlight made her cheeks look washed out. Jack opened her closet and flipped on the light. Dresses, little jackets, a plastic bin of shoes. Nothing else. He crouched and looked under the bed. Dust bunnies, a lost sock, no monsters. He sat on the edge of her mattress and held her face in his hands. "You are safe," he said. Hazel studied him, not convinced but trying. "Is that lady safe?" she asked. Jack's mouth went dry. "I do not know," he admitted. Hazel's fingers found the red stitching. "Mr. Blue is safe," she said, like that mattered. Jack kissed her forehead. "Try to sleep," he said. "I will be right outside." He left her door open a crack and went back to the living room. Claire was at the front door, hand on the knob. Jack's voice came low. "Do not disappear again." Claire turned. Her eyes were tired, but steady. "I will not," she said. Jack took a step closer. "If they come back," he said. "If that SUV comes back." Claire nodded once. "Call me," she said, and gave him a number that was not the one on her business card. Jack repeated it until he could feel it in his teeth. Claire opened the door, stepped into the fog, and was gone in 3 quiet strides as if the night had swallowed her whole. Jack did not sleep after that. He sat in the living room with the bat across his knees until the first gray light seeped into the windows. He kept listening. He kept looking at the porch through the glass. Nothing came back. At 6, Hazel's alarm chirped, cheerful and wrong. Jack made breakfast with hands that felt too heavy. Hazel ate without talking much. Her eyes looked older in the morning light. She kept Mr. Blue on the table beside her bowl like a guard. Jack drove her to school and did not let her out of his sight until she walked through the front doors. He did not leave the parking lot. He parked in a spot that gave him a view of the street and the fence line. He sat with his coffee cooling in the cup holder and watched parents drop kids off, watched teachers wave, watched the crossing guard lift the sign. Then at 8:23, the black SUV rolled into view. It moved slow, smooth, like it had nowhere to be. It parked along the curb a half block down, far enough to look incidental, close enough to see the schoolyard. The windows were tinted dark. The vehicle was clean, no mud on the tires, no salt streaks. It did not belong to this town. Jack's pulse kicked. He grabbed his phone and lifted it, pretending to check something. He angled the camera and zoomed until the rear plate filled the screen. He took 3 photos. The SUV sat for 4 minutes, then pulled away, turning toward the highway as if it had been there only to remind him it could be. Jack stared after it until it vanished into mist. Then he started his truck and drove out of Port Silas with the photos burning a hole in his pocket. The county offices were in Grayport, 40 minutes inland, where the air smelled less like salt and more like wet soil and exhaust. The building was a squat brick block with fluorescent lights that made everything look sicker than it was. Jack parked, locked his truck, and walked inside. The records office smelled like paper toner and old coffee. A line of people waited at the counter holding forms and folders. Jack stood behind a man arguing about property taxes and tried to keep his face blank. When it was his turn, the clerk looked up without interest. She had glasses on a chain and a pen tucked behind her ear. "Can I help you?" she asked. Jack slid his phone across the counter, with the photo pulled up. "I need to run a plate," he said. The clerk's eyes narrowed. "You law enforcement." No, Jack said. I have a reason. She looked at him for a long beat. Her gaze flicked to his hands calloused and raw at the knuckles, to his jaw tight, to his eyes too awake. Private record requests require a form, she said, and slid one across. Jack filled it out. Name, address, statement of purpose that he kept vague but honest enough to live with. He signed it with a hand that did not shake. The clerk typed the plate into her computer. Her fingers moved quick. Her expression stayed flat until it did not. She blinked once and leaned closer to the screen. Jack's stomach tightened. What? She cleared her throat. Registration shows a corporate owner, she said. Blackwater Compliance. Jack stared at the name. It sounded like something from a cheap movie, which made it worse, not better. Address, Jack said. The clerk clicked again. It says dissolved, she said, and her voice changed slightly like she had stepped into something strange. Dissolved 4 years ago. Jack's heart hammered. Then why is a vehicle still registered to it? She gave him a look that meant she could ask him the same question. Sometimes things stay alive on paper longer than they should, she said. Jack asked, Can I see filings? The clerk hesitated, then nodded toward a row of public terminals along the wall. Business registry is public, she said. You can search there. Jack thanked her and walked to the terminal with his legs feeling stiff. He typed Blackwater Compliance into the search bar. The screen loaded slow. He stared at the spinning icon like it was a countdown. The result popped up. Limited liability company, formation date, dissolution date, a single case listed under a line that read services rendered. One case. Jack clicked. A scanned document opened. A case number. A short description that meant nothing to him. Names blacked out in places. And a line labeled Supervising Counsel. Claire Wren. Jack felt the room tilt. His palms went damp on the keyboard. He printed the page. The printer whirred and spat out warm paper. Jack held it in his hands and stared at Claire's name until the letters blurred. Outside, the sky stayed gray. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed like insects. Jack walked back to the counter. The clerk looked up. Get what you needed. Jack kept his voice low. Do you know where that company operated? She shook her head. Not my job, she said. Then softer. If something is wrong, you should talk to the sheriff. Jack forced a polite nod and walked out, the printout folded in his pocket like a blade. He drove back to Port Silas with his jaw clenched and his hands steady on the wheel. The ferry horn sounded faint in the distance when he crested the last hill and saw the water again, gray under gray. It felt like the town was holding its breath. Claire's office lights were off when he arrived. He did not go upstairs. He waited in his truck parked half a block down where he could see the staircase and the frosted glass door. Time moved slow. People passed. A couple with umbrellas, a man carrying groceries, a teenager on a bike cutting through puddles. Jack watched each of them like they might turn into someone else. At 5:42, the door opened and Claire stepped out. She locked it and stood for a moment at the landing, scanning the street before she moved. Her posture was controlled, but her head turned too often like a person counting exits. Jack got out of his truck and walked up the sidewalk. Claire saw him when he was 10 feet away. Her shoulders stiffened. She did not step back. Mr. Mercer, samo se medeta emergency, se shemabde nisiani de bibigi sibi dupa mi. Sambidis didimi sindis dididi bosida skishimis diminusil. Jack stopped in front of her. The street smelled like wet rope and diesel. The fog was thinner now, but the air still felt heavy. He pulled the folded printout from his pocket and held it up. Blackwater Compliance, he said. Claire's face went still. Jack watched her eyes flick to the paper, then to his, then away, searching for a lie that would fit. You told me nobody sent you, Jack said. Claire's voice stayed calm, but it was too tight. Nobody did. Jack shook the paper once. Your name is on their only case, he said. A company that is dissolved, but still has a vehicle following my daughter. Claire's throat moved. Her fingers tightened on the strap of her bag. Do not say this here, she said. Jack leaned closer, keeping his voice low but hard. Then tell me where to say it. Claire's gaze flicked past him to the street. Hazel was not with him. Jack had picked her up from school and left her with Mara again. He had not told Mara why. He had only asked her to keep Hazel inside. Claire's eyes returned to Jack. The mask on her face looked thinner now, stretched. Jack asked, Who are you? And the question was not about law degrees. Claire inhaled. It sounded like it hurt. I am someone who made a mistake, she said. Jack felt anger flare. My wife died, he said. That is not a mistake. That is a ruin. Claire's eyes glistened, but held. Yes, she said. And the way it happened does not fit the story you were given. Jack froze. His breath caught in his throat like he had inhaled smoke. Claire spoke very quietly. "There are things about Rowan's death that do not add up," she said. "Things that never did." Jack's voice came out rough. "Say it," he demanded. "Say what you mean." Claire looked at him, as if she could see the shape of his grief the way it had set in his bones. "The fire was treated as simple," she said. "Fast paperwork, quick closure, a clean narrative." Jack's hands curled at his sides. "It was not clean," he said. Claire's jaw tightened. "No," she agreed. "And when I looked too closely, people with money told me to stop." Jack stared at her. The street noise fell away. All he could hear was his own heartbeat and the faint gull cries down by the docks. He whispered, "You worked the case." Claire nodded once. Jack's voice rose before he could stop it. "You knew," he said. "You knew, and you stayed quiet." Claire flinched. Her eyes flashed with something like pain and anger turned inward. "I was not quiet," she said. "I was shut down." Jack stepped closer. "By who?" Claire's mouth trembled, then steadied. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small notepad. Her pen shook once as she uncapped it. She wrote a name slow and deliberate, then tore the page free. She held it out to Jack. Jack took the paper and looked down. "Miles Harrow." Claire's voice was barely above a whisper. "If you want to understand what happened," she said, "you start with him." Jack stood on the sidewalk with the damp air clinging to his skin and the torn page pinched between his fingers. Miles Harrow. The letters were neat, deliberate. Claire's handwriting looked like it had been trained to behave. Jack looked up. "Who is he?" Claire's face stayed composed, but her eyes were too bright. "Someone who knows what I am allowed to say and what I am not," she replied. "That sounds like another lock," Jack said. Claire's mouth tightened. "It is," she said, "and he has the key to the part you keep asking for." Jack held the paper up between them. "How do I find him?" Claire reached into her bag again and pulled out a second slip, smaller folded. She did not hand it to him right away. Her fingers hovered, as if she was deciding whether the paper was a gift or a weapon. "Call this number," she said finally, and placed it in Jack's palm. "Do not use your name on voicemail. Do not say Port Silas. Ask for a meeting, somewhere public, somewhere with exits." Jack stared at the number. "You are serious," he said. Claire's eyes flicked to the street, then back. "I have never been more serious," she replied. Jack's throat tightened. "Why him?" he asked. "Why not you?" Claire's voice dropped. "Because I already gave you everything I can without getting you watched even harder," she said. Jack's laugh came out low, harder than tonight. Claire did not react. She only said, "Pick up your daughter. Keep her inside." Jack stood there a moment longer, wanting to push, wanting to break the calm off her face and find the truth under it. But the street was too open, and Claire kept glancing at reflections like the world had eyes. Jack folded both slips of paper and tucked them into his wallet behind Hazel's school photo. He turned and walked away without saying goodbye, because goodbye sounded too much like permission. Mara opened her door before Jack knocked. She took one look at his face and did not ask questions. Hazel ran up with her boots half on cocoa scent clinging to her hair, Mr. Blue tucked under her arm. "You're early," Hazel said. "Yeah," Jack replied, keeping his voice light. "Had some stuff to do." Hazel eyed him the way she always did, like she was reading a page he was trying to hide. She did not press. She hugged Mara, waved, then skipped to the truck. On the drive home, Jack kept the radio off. The silence made the engine sound louder. Rain ticked at the windshield. Hazel hummed to herself a soft tune that matched the wipers. At home, Jack made dinner and kept his eyes on the windows. Hazel ate, talked about a spelling quiz, asked for another honey stick from the pantry. She leaned her cheek against Mr. Blue as she watched a show half asleep on the couch. When Jack finally carried her to bed, she sighed into his shoulder like she trusted him to hold the whole world together. He tucked her in, checked her closet, checked under the bed. He did it without her asking. Hazel's eyes fluttered open. "Dad," she murmured. "Yeah, bug." "Is the black car still here?" she asked. Jack swallowed. "No," he said. Hazel's fingers slid to the red stitching. She pressed it once. "Okay," she whispered, and let her eyes close again. Jack left her door cracked and went back to the kitchen. He set his phone on the table, then stared at it until his eyes burned. He dialed the number Claire gave him and held the phone to his ear. It rang 4 times. A man answered on the 5th voice, rough with sleep or whiskey. "Yeah." Jack kept his voice low. "I need to speak with Miles Harrow." Silence. A faint clink like a glass set down. "Who is this?" the man asked. Jack swallowed. "A person with a reason." Another pause, heavier. "You got the name from Claire," the man said, and it was not a question. Jack's grip tightened on the phone. "Yes." The man exhaled slow. "You can meet him," he said. "Tomorrow is no." Next week is no. You want him, you come now. You drive to the Harbor Light Diner off Route 12. You sit in the back booth. You order coffee. If you bring cops, he leaves. If you bring anyone else, he leaves. Jack did not ask how the man knew what he would do. He only said, "I'll be there." The line went dead. Jack sat at the table a second longer, feeling the house around him warm and fragile. Then he stood, grabbed his jacket, and wrote a quick note for Mara in case he needed her. He did not put details on paper. He only wrote, "If I call, please come." He drove out of Port Silas with rain following him like a tail. The road cut inland through dark trees and wet fields. Headlights reflected off standing water. Every oncoming car made his shoulders tense. The Harbor Light Diner sat beside a gas station and a closed bait shop, its neon sign sputtering in the rain. The parking lot was half empty. A few trucks. A sedan with a cracked taillight. Jack parked where he could see the entrance. Inside, the air was thick with fried food and coffee. A jukebox played something old and slow. A couple argued in low voices near the window. Two men in rain jackets ate pie with the focus of people who had been working since dawn. Jack slid into the back booth like he had been told. The vinyl was cracked. The table was sticky around the edges. A waitress with tired eyes brought him coffee without asking. "You want food?" she asked. "Just coffee," Jack said. She poured, steam rising. The mug was too hot at the rim. Jack let his hands hover near it anyway, as if warmth could steady him. He watched the door. 10 minutes passed. 15. Then a man walked in who did not fit the diner. He was in his 70s, tall but bowed slightly at the shoulders. White hair combed back not carefully, but with habit. He wore a wool coat that had seen better decades and leather gloves that looked soft from use. His hands trembled when he took them off, the movement small but constant. He scanned the room, once eyes sharp despite the age, then walked straight to Jack's booth and slid in across from him. "Jack Mercer," the man said. His voice was quiet, but it carried weight. Jack felt his stomach tighten. "Miles Harrow," he replied. Miles nodded once, like checking a box. "You look like you haven't slept," he said. Jack did not bother denying it. "Claire said you know what happened," he said. Miles looked past Jack toward the diner window, where rain ran down in thick lines. "Claire shouldn't have had to send you to me," he replied. Jack leaned forward. "Then why did she?" he asked. Miles's mouth tightened. He wrapped both hands around his coffee mug when it arrived, as if the heat was the only thing keeping his fingers steady. He did not drink yet. "I used to be her supervising partner," Miles said, "at a firm in Seattle, big enough that you could hide ugly things behind nice stationery." Jack watched Miles's face as he spoke. The man looked tired in a way that did not come from age alone. It looked like regret. Miles continued. "Claire was the kind of associate you brag about. Sharp, clean, stubborn. You want someone like her on paper because it makes you look ethical. You do not want someone like her in the room when a powerful client asks you to forget what you saw." Jack's jaw clenched. "Rowan," he said. Miles nodded. "Rowan Mercer," he repeated. "Your wife." The name in a stranger's mouth made Jack's chest ache. He kept his voice steady with effort. "How did you know her?" he asked. "I did not," Miles replied. "I knew the file, I knew the client, I knew the pressure." Jack's hands curled under the table. "Tell me," he said. Miles finally sipped his coffee. His hand shook just enough that the liquid rippled. He set the mug down carefully. "Your wife died in a house fire outside Tacoma," Miles said. "Insurance company wanted the claim closed fast. Less time means less digging. Less digging means fewer questions. The corporate interests involved were invested in it being simple." Jack stared at him. "Corporate interests," he repeated. Miles's eyes met his. "Arcadine Consortium," he said. He said. Jack felt the name land. He did not know it personally, but it sounded like something that sat in boardrooms and decided how other people lived. Miles went on. "Claire was assigned to assist with the claim review and the legal language that keeps everyone from getting sued. She was supposed to help push it through. She did her job, then she did something extra." Jack's throat tightened. "She looked closer," he said. Miles nodded. "She noticed inconsistencies," he replied. "Small ones at first. A witness statement that used the wrong time. A photo from the scene that didn't match the angle described in the report. Notes that disappeared between drafts. It bothered her." Jack leaned forward, voice low. "It bothered me too," he said. "But I was busy burying my wife and raising a toddler." Miles's expression shifted. Not pity, something like shame. "Yes," he said. "And people who profit from quiet deaths count on that." Jack held his gaze. "So, what did Claire do?" he asked. "She asked for more," Miles replied. "More photos, more records, more access. She asked questions a junior attorney is not supposed to ask when the firm has already decided what the truth is. Jack's breath came shallow. "And you," he said. "What did you do?" Miles's jaw tightened. He looked down at his hands. The tremor was worse now, like the question had turned the heat up. "I told her to stop," Miles admitted. "I told her she could ruin her career. I told her the client would crush her. I told her to let it go." Jack felt anger rise sharp and clean. "And she didn't," he said. Miles shook his head once. "No," he replied. "She pushed. She dug. She started collecting copies of things that were not meant to be copied. When the senior partners found out, they called her into a room and closed the door. Arcadine's people were there, lawyers, security, the kind of people who smile while they warn you." Jack's fingers clenched into his palm. "They threatened her," he said. Miles's voice stayed quiet. "They threatened her license," he replied. "They threatened lawsuits. They threatened to make her life small and expensive. They told her she had misread the file and should stop imagining patterns." Jack's laugh came out hollow. "Patterns like a black SUV at my kid's school," he said. Miles's eyes flicked up. "So you have seen it," he said. Jack stared back. "Yes," he replied. "Ici, and someone stood on my porch last night." Miles's face tightened, like the words confirmed something he had been dreading. He reached into his coat pocket slowly and pulled out a thick manila envelope. The edges were worn soft, like it had been held too many times. He set it on the table between them. Jack's eyes dropped to it. There was a stamp on the front in red ink, bold and official. The paper looked like it belonged in a courthouse, not on a diner table, beside a sugar dispenser. Miles kept his hand on the envelope for a moment, fingers trembling. "Claire gave me that years ago," he said. "She asked me to keep it somewhere no one would look. She told me to give it to you only if things started moving again." Jack looked up. "Moving," he repeated. Miles nodded once. "Blackwater Compliance," he said quietly. "That was a shell, a front. A place to park people and vehicles and paperwork so it did not trace back clean." Jack felt a cold drop in his stomach. "And Claire's name on their case," he said. Miles's mouth tightened. "She was forced into the orbit of it," he replied. "She fought, then she lost. Then she kept fighting in the only way she could, quietly, watching, waiting for the right moment to put the truth in the right hands." Jack stared at the envelope as if it might bite him. "What is it?" he asked. Miles slid it closer. "Open it," he said. Jack's hands felt clumsy as he lifted the flap. The paper made a dry, soft sound that seemed too loud in the diner. Inside was a file thick and formal, with a cover sheet stamped again in red. "Federal Child Endangerment." Jack's breath caught. His eyes dropped to the next line. "Subject Hazel Mercer." For a second the room narrowed. The hum of the lights, the clink of dishes, the distant jukebox song, all of it blurred behind the words. Jack gripped the file so hard his knuckles went white. "This is real," he whispered, though he already knew it was. Miles watched him across the table. His eyes were tired and steady. "Yes," he said. Jack swallowed hard. His voice came out rough. "Why would my daughter have a federal file?" he asked. Miles did not answer right away. He looked around the diner, not paranoid but careful. Then he leaned in slightly and spoke low. "Because someone decided she mattered," he said, "in a way you do not get to ignore." Jack's throat tightened until it felt like smoke. He closed the envelope, hands shaking now. He shoved it into his jacket like he could hide it from the world by putting it close to his heart. Miles sat back. His fingers trembled around his mug. "You should not have had to meet me like this," he said. Jack stood up fast enough that the booth seat squeaked. He left cash on the table without looking at it. Miles's voice followed him quiet. "Keep your daughter close." Jack did not respond. He walked out into the rain with the envelope pressing hard against his ribs, the neon diner sign buzzing behind him, and the night air tasting like wet asphalt and salt that had followed him inland. Jack drove home through rain that turned the road into a black ribbon. The manila envelope dug into his ribs inside his jacket. He checked the mirror too often and hated himself for it. The porch light was on. The house looked ordinary. That was the point he realized. If it looked normal, it was easier to get close. He locked the door, then laid the envelope on the kitchen table and opened it again. The red stamp glared back at him. "Federal Child Endangerment, subject Hazel Mercer." He read Hazel's name until his eyes stung. Jack dialed the number Claire had given him the night she showed up at his driveway. She answered immediately. "Jack, I have a federal file on my kid," he said. His voice came out flat. "Tell me you didn't know." Silence, then a quiet, honest word. "I knew." Jack gripped the phone. "I met Miles Harrow," he said. "He handed this to me. Claire exhaled. "Stay there," she said. "I'm coming." 10 minutes later, she was at his kitchen table, coat-damp hair pinned back like she had rebuilt herself on the drive over. She opened the file, eyes moving fast, then stopped, as if the paper had turned to stone. "They finally activated it," she said. Jack leaned forward. "Why her?" Claire looked down to the hall toward Hazel's room. Her voice lowered. "Because someone has been searching for what your wife hid," she said. "Tomorrow morning. 9. Federal Courthouse in Seattle. You bring Hazel. You stay with her. You do exactly what I say." "No more half answers," Jack said. Claire's gaze held his. "The man who has been watching her is in custody," she replied. "This hearing keeps him there. If you do not show up, you lose protection." "What's his name?" Jack asked. Claire's jaw tightened. "Graham Voss." Dawn came cold. Hazel rode beside Jack, half asleep, Mr. Blue tucked under her chin. Fog pooled in the low stretches of highway. Jack drove without stopping. The courthouse swallowed sound. Security took Hazel's backpack, scanned the beaver, handed it back like it was nothing. Hazel hugged it tighter anyway. Claire met them outside a small courtroom, with a woman in a dark suit and short gray hair. The woman's eyes swept Jack and Hazel like an inventory. "Front row," Claire told Jack. "Do not speak to anyone." Inside, the air smelled like disinfectant and paper. Hazel's hand locked around Jack's. 2 marshals brought a man in cuffs through the door. Mid-50s, thinning gray hair suit, wrinkled and expensive. He sat at the defense table and lifted his eyes straight to Hazel. Hazel's breath broke. "That's him," she whispered. The man smiled, slow and empty. His lips moved just enough for Jack to read them. "Hello again." Jack stood up so fast the bench scraped. Marshall stepped between him and the defense table. Claire's voice cut clean through the room. "Mr. Mercer, sit down." Jack sat shaking with restrained violence. The hearing moved fast. Charges read aloud. Conditions argued. The prosecutor spoke like she had been waiting years to say the words. The judge's face did not change. When it ended, Claire led Jack into a conference room. Hazel curled on a worn couch with Mr. Blue and fell asleep exhausted. Claire opened a folder and finally let the truth land without softness. "Rowan worked for Arcadine Consortium," she said. "Compliance and auditing. She found falsified safety inspections tied to deaths. She collected proof and planned to report it." Jack stared at his hands. The skin around his nails looked raw. "They burned her," he said. Claire nodded once. "Graham Voss ran security for Arcadine," she said. "He staged the fire to erase evidence and silence her. He believed she hid a backup." Jack's throat tightened. Why follow Hazel? Claire's eyes went to the sleeping child. "Because Rowan hid the backup where no one would look," she said. "Somewhere Hazel would keep close." Jack saw it in his mind before Claire said another word. Red thread, a hard ridge under fabric, Rowan's careful stitches. Back home that night, Hazel sat at the kitchen table in her pajamas, cocoa cooling in a mug. She slid Mr. Blue toward Jack. "His tummy is itchy," she said. Jack turned the toy under the lamp. The red stitching looked brighter than it should. He found the buried loose thread and pulled gently. The seam opened with a soft rip. A small brass key dropped into his palm. Cold, heavy. A folded note followed paper worn thin at the crease. Jack opened it. "For my brave girl, when the fog lifts, you'll know." Hazel leaned in, eyes wide. Mom wrote that, she whispered. Jack closed his hand around the key and held Hazel against his chest until his breathing slowed. The next morning, Claire met them at a bank in Seattle. The vault smelled like metal and cold stone. A clerk set a narrow safety deposit box on the table. Hazel's name was printed on the form. Jack signed with a hand that did not feel like his. The key turned with a small final click. Inside were printed emails, a flash drive, and a notebook in Rowan's handwriting. Dates, property codes, numbers circled in red. A map of lies made solid. Claire stared at it, then let out a breath that sounded like pain leaving. "This is enough," she said. The trial took months. Jack sat through photographs of charred beams and testimony that made his stomach turn. He heard calm voices describe risk like weather. He watched Voss shrink from confident to cornered. When the verdict came, the word guilty hit Jack like a door unlocking. He did not cheer. He only held Hazel's hand so tightly she winced, then leaned into him anyway. Outside, the courthouse sunlight warmed his face. Hazel carried Mr. Blue under her arm, the seam stitched closed, again red thread neat and quiet. Claire stood beside them, shoulders looser than he had ever seen. "What happens now?" Jack asked. Claire hesitated. "My assignment is done," she said, "but I was offered a position in Port Silas." Hazel tugged Claire's sleeve. "Don't go," she said, simple as breath. Claire knelt. "Only if you want me to," she replied. Is this? Hazel shook her head hard. I don't. Jack looked at the two of them and felt something shift in his chest. Not relief exactly, but space. The fairy horn sounded from the water low and long. This time it did not feel like a warning. Jack nodded once. Thank you, he said. Claire's eyes glistened. Thank you for letting me stay, she replied. Hazel ran ahead on the steps, chasing a pale butterfly that had drifted down in the sun. Jack followed with Claire beside him, the air clean, the world finally drawn in solid lines. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.